Right in the middle of a very important clash between the Trump administration and the courts. And it has been rapidly developing and escalating over the past 48 hours or so. As we talked about on Friday night's show, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 is a law that is a wartime law in this country. It's used during wartime only. The last time it was used was during World War II, when it was used to put Japanese Americans in internment camps, something for which the U.S. government later apologized and paid reparations under Ronald Reagan. Nevertheless, in an unannounced written statement this weekend, Donald Trump claimed that that was the law he would use as the basis for deporting people who he determined to be members of a Venezuelan gang. He would use that law to deport people immediately, without any due process or any legal consideration at all. Organizations, including the ACLU, sued immediately to block him from using that 1700s law. The chief judge of the Washington, D.C. Federal District Court held an emergency hearing on the ACLU's lawsuit late Saturday afternoon. And at that hearing, the ACLU's lawyer, Lee Gallant, told that judge that it was his understanding that planes were about to take off, or possibly had taken off during the hearing, carrying hundreds of men out of this country toward a prison in El Salvador. There was a Trump administration lawyer there representing the government. That lawyer said he couldn't give the judge any information about that at all. So again, this was an emergency hearing late on Saturday, and the judge ended up basically saying, listen, there are difficult questions of law here, and these are going to have to be worked out in the courts. For now, I am blocking the Trump administration from deporting people under this law from the 1700s. They are blocked from using this law as the basis for these deportations until we can hash out these legal questions. So the judge actually said to the Trump administration lawyer, quote, "You shall inform your clients," meaning inform the Trump administration, "of this immediately. You should inform them that any plane containing these folks that's going to take off or is in the air needs to be returned to the United States. Those people need to be returned to the United States. Quote, this is something that you need to make sure is complied with immediately." By all appearances, that order was not complied with immediately. NBC News reports that 2 flights carrying these men were in transit when the judge issued his ruling, but they did not turn around. They continued on their way. The Washington Post reports that a 3rd plane was still on the ground at the time of that ruling. It hadn't taken off in Texas until after that judge's ruling had been issued. The next morning, the pro-Trump president of El Salvador announced that his country had accepted 238 men from the United States. He posted a slickly produced 3-minute propaganda video of some of these men being sort of manhandled and pushed around, and all of them having their heads shaved by armed Salvadoran military or security forces. President Trump happily posted the video as well. The president of El Salvador says these men will be jailed in a massive prison in his country for as many years as the U.S. wants to pay him to keep them there. They have not been charged with crimes and thereby sentenced to serve this time. They're just being locked up indefinitely at the pleasure of El Salvador. At the White House press briefing today, Trump's press secretary listed all the crimes these men ostensibly committed, but a senior Trump administration official tells NBC News that these men have not necessarily been convicted of any of these crimes. Still, though, they're in prison now in El Salvador indefinitely, having been disappeared out of this country with no process whatsoever. We don't even know who these guys are. They keep saying they're Venezuelan gang members. We don't even know if they're Venezuelans, let alone gang members. Unsurprisingly, the federal judge who held that hearing on Saturday, where he made it abundantly clear that nobody was supposed to be sent to El Salvador, he called a new hearing today to assess whether the Trump administration had knowingly violated his court order. Quote, a federal judge pressed a Justice Department lawyer today over why the Trump administration did not comply with his order to temporarily halt deportations under an 18th century law, and asked why key information about the flights was being withheld over the weekend. In a tense hearing, the judge summarized the administration's position on his court order Saturday as, quote, we don't care, we'll do what we want. The Trump administration lawyer at this evening's hearing still refused to provide any information about the flights. And so the judge has now ordered another hearing for tomorrow at noon, at which the Trump administration must give him the information he wants or explain the legal rationale for why they are not giving it to him. And if they don't, then, well then. Hanging in the balance immediately is the fate of untold numbers of people who Donald Trump may try to send to this Salvadoran prison. The president of El Salvador has said openly that he'd be happy to put U.S. citizens there too. But also hanging in the balance is whether the Trump administration is considering not just trying to wheedle their way out of it, but whether they're considering openly flouting a court order, which is a very fast trip down a very short street in terms of how much of a republic we still are.
Donald Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act to quickly deport dozens of violent criminal illegals in our country with deep ties to dangerous gangs like Tren de Aragua. As per usual, a far-left judge tried to intervene, but it was too little, too late. The illegals were already out of the country on flights to El Salvador, where they will be locked up in the country's massive prison system for what would be a fraction of the cost compared to a U.S. prison. And on social media, the White House commemorated the moment with the song Closing. The band did not endorse the use of their song, and needless to say, Democrats, the media mob, they're not happy about any of it. They are now so deeply concerned with the violent Latin American gang members that Biden and Harris allowed into the country. Can't make it up, but take a look.
When you heard the president and his top aides talking about mass deportations, they over and over said, we're going to start with the most criminal among us, but we don't have any evidence of who the people really are and what their backgrounds truly are.
We can't trust this administration to actually use a scalpel, but instead they love to use a butcher knife on things. And so giving them this wide latitude to just kind of go across and just claim that anybody is anything is wrong.
And to think that people are now being sent there without due process, Anna, that part is definitely unprecedented.
You just got to keep your eyes open, y'all. Because if they can just come up and take somebody because they've made a decision that you're supposed to be that person, any one of us could find ourselves being deported to some country.
Don't give them any ideas, girl.
Actually, the commander-in-chief does have the right to deport them. That would be part of his job. And also, what about the safety of your family and loved ones over the non-existent rights of people that didn't respect our laws, border sovereignty, illegal immigrants? This brings us now to another hot mic drop moment from border czar Tom Homan, who had a simple but effective response to reporters obsessed with the 18th century Alien Enemies Act. Take a look.
What do you say to those who claim you're using a 200-year-old law to circumvent due process?
An old law? Not as old as the Constitution. We still pay attention to that, don't we?
Checkmate, Tom Homan. Make no mistake, President Trump is going to use every law in the book to protect you, the American people, expel criminal illegal aliens from our country. And by the way, that is exactly what the American people voted for. All right, it's time now for the Hannity Washington briefing, and there's only one person available for that, and that is White House Press Secretary, our friend Caroline Leavitt. Let's talk about the Alien Enemies Act that has been used multiple times by multiple presidents, and it is very, very crystal clear. Any invasion, predatory incursion shall be perpetrated, attempted, or threatened against the territory of the U.S. by any foreign nation, government. The president shall make a public proclamation of the event, and these people shall be removed from this country. It's not really that difficult to comprehend. However, Democrats are using the courts. This is now the, 50th time the Democrats have gone to the courts? 15 times they've been successful. I do believe it'll be overturned. Your thoughts?
Promises made, promises kept, Sean. President Trump campaigned on securing our homeland, on expelling foreign terrorists and illegal violent criminals from our nation's interior, and that is exactly what he is doing. On February 20th, President Trump signed an executive order designating Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization because that is what they are. As you just heard Sarah so eloquently say, these are some of the most heinous monsters, criminal gangsters, violent murderers and rapists who have invaded our country under the lawlessness of the previous administration. There is a new sheriff in town now, and he is using every lever of executive authority to secure our country. That's why the president invoked the Alien Enemies Act. He is well within his constitutional and legal and executive authority to do so. And our administration is prepared to fight this battle in court because we know that this was a whole of government effort. This was a successful counterterrorism operation led by President Trump, the Department of State, the Department of Homeland Security, and now the Department of Justice, who will win this battle in court on behalf of the American people and the innocent, beautiful women who were slaughtered. Their lives were taken too short at the hands of these illegal foreign terrorists. And if the Democrats want to pick this fight, Sean, it's one we will pick all day long, because they are now arguing that the president should have turned around those planes with these foreign terrorists on them. I don't think the American public want these people in our country. That's why they overwhelmingly reelected President Trump. He is doing the will of the American public who elected him to this office. And thank God he is, because he is saving countless lives in the process.
Carolyn, 4 different presidents have used this act, the Alien Enemies Act, prior to President Trump. There was a Supreme Court decision in 1948, and the court stated a president's decision under the act precludes judicial review of the removal order. They don't even have a say in the courts on this. I don't think that's going to be overturned.
We feel very confident. We know we are going to win this battle in court because, again, the president is acting within his executive authority as the commander-in-chief of our country, as the Alien Enemies Act clearly states. And so we have, unfortunately, Sean, a judicial branch that has gotten so out of control. You have single judges in single cities in lower courts trying to determine the way in which the president handles foreign relations. They cannot be allowed to do that. If we live in a country where the will of the American people is subverted by a single judge in a single court, we no longer live in a democracy. And so this president and this administration are fighting for our Constitution and for our democracy, and fighting for the will of the American people to be done, and for foreign terrorists to be expelled from American soil, to make the communities of law-abiding citizens safer every single day.